think of how much you learnt through play. Think of how better you are now at just about anything. And think about how bad you were when you started.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Wargaming for the corporate and executive security professional sounds a little bit like a play on words, really, doesn't it? I'm here with John Moss, and today we're going to be talking to Nick Drage, a professional war gamer, about whether or not this is applicable not just to business, but our industry. John, what does this conjure up for you? Because for me, it smacks of Dungeons and Dragons and basement games. Surely there's more to it than that.
Okay, so when I first saw that this was the topic of the podcast, that's exactly what I thought. I thought Dungeons and Dragons. I thought guys sat around big tabletops, pushing models around. And then obviously I knew that wasn't going to be the focus of the podcast. So, okay, think about it a little bit more deeply. And yeah, there was echoes coming back from my time in the military. And I know you've done this interview with Sean, and I'm suspecting that Sean will have probably had a very similar train of thought as well. You know, we sort of, not so much tabletop. Yes, perhaps if you're an officer, but for the guys on the ground, we do a lot of training where the expectation is that you will be thrown into situations where you might not come out of it smelling of roses. And, you know, that's one of the hardest parts of it, actually, that you then sit around in these debriefs afterwards and pull apart everything that went wrong. And I'm getting a sense of that is what the focus of this is.
It is indeed. And it's a safer or a safe space to fail or to, look at interesting scenarios ranging from the likely to the very unlikely black swan type scenarios. And it's a comfortable environment where you're going to be able to make a mistake. But again, you're right. There is that level of, well, people will pull you up on things you haven't done. So is it for the entire team? Is it just for the operational staff? Is it a management exercise? And I think we'll find that, in fact, it's all of those things. And another thing that Nick is part of, Play Secure, which our friend James Bohr, if you remember, James did one of our first podcasts, trying to emphasize that play or gamified learning is not only more productive for the learning process, but also it gives that freedom to fail. Why do you think people aren't doing more of this?
Because we're not comfortable failing. Certainly in our industry, if you're failing on the job, there's a good chance that you won't work again. Well, first of all, you fail once, and depending on the size of it, it could result in you not working for that client again. If you fail again, or if the failure is bigger, you might not even work in the industry again. It's literally that cutthroat. And there's two sides to that. I suppose if you want to say the good side of it is, it causes everybody to be on their A game all of the time. But on the flip of that, it creates a lot of pressure, and it makes the conditions that we operate in a lot more stressful and pressurized, and more likely that people will fail.
No, that's a great point. And then I guess not just why is it not done, but when we see offerings of training out there, maybe, and this is just extrapolating from the topic, maybe it's more difficult to set up a wargaming exercise than it is a PowerPoint presentation. So maybe we don't see enough of it because it's more complicated. It requires much more forethought, and maybe it's something that you can do internally as opposed to having to go externally. I don't know. What do you think the military did well in that respect? Because I think there's lots of lessons to be learned.
Yeah, so there's a few big differences with the military, and it's kind of going back to my last comments. One of them is, for the most part, you don't really need to fear about being sacked. You can fail in the military, and it's only remembered as long as it takes for the next person to fail. And kind of that's how it works. And ironically, I feel like when you're in the military and you're working under those kind of conditions, you grow stronger because of that, because of this culture of acceptance that it's okay to fail. And I don't know why it is that we haven't carried that better into the commercial world, except for, like I said, people's livelihoods rest on it. And in the commercial world, also, teams are smaller, right down to solo operators. But as I say that, it makes me think that, in a sense, we do kind of do this wargaming. We might not even realize we do it, but, it's called an after ops debrief, where we'll sit around and, I know this is slightly different because we're talking about something afterwards rather than for a situation that may never even happen. And whereas we're talking very specifically about a set of circumstances, but it is better than nothing. And I do think there's echoes of the wargaming principle. So it would seem that would be a logical next step. And I think to think about, well, where does the responsibility lie? I mean, it rests on all of our shoulders, but ultimately, you want somebody who is in a position to take control, take command, and also perhaps has a budget as well if we're bringing in somebody from outside.
Indeed, it often comes down to budget, doesn't it? But as I'm sure we will find out from Nick, you can do it on a budget, and it doesn't have to be all bells and whistles. It could just be something tabletop based, and maybe not those little metal figurines that we imagine people playing with. Nothing wrong with that. I love a bit of gaming, but yes, it's perhaps something that corporations and businesses need to appreciate more than feeling it's just another playtime. So Nick Drage, great friend of the industry, at least on the cyber side. He's had his eyes on the EP community for a while. He has attended a bunch of our events. So it's not without context that he is explaining to us what wargaming could do to benefit our industry. Very much looking forward to this. Sean and myself with Nick Drage.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit magazine.
Wargaming and its applicability in the business and security environment. Today, we are here with Nick Drage, a director at Path Dependence and Play Secure, which is another initiative. It's a pleasure to have you on. We're really excited about this topic. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
So Nick, let's just get to it, because automatically when we hear wargaming, we assume absolutely it is in the wheelhouse of security. We heard the word war. We remember that lots of colleagues used to be in the military and they must have done some wargaming. So what problem is wargaming actually trying to solve anyway?
Wargaming is trying to solve the problem of not being prepared for the situations you encounter. There's so many problems wargaming is trying to solve, and in so many different ways, but I will endeavour to keep it short and digestible. Same, especially in the world of executive protection, you wouldn't dream of reading a book on how to do it and then you go out and protect an asset. You actually want to go through that. However, but also imagine that then that you only do real world training, and that you therefore you actually get shot at, or you're driving up and down a specially purpose-built area day in, day out just to learn the basics. There's a There's a halfway between that, and wargaming is the way to do that, to either through a discussion or an organized discussion or even a board game, play through a scenario, try out different things, and especially be in a safe to fail environment. The thing you want during training and during a war game is for your participants to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, so that when it comes to a real context, a real scenario, they've already been through it anywhere between sort of 5 and 500 times, to the extent that they then react automatically. That's what a war game is, and war game meant in the widest sense. It could be training, it could be an immersive exercise, it could be scenario planning, it could just be sitting around a table talking through a situation. The problem with the term is that people imagine you're pushing metal figures around a table, reenacting the Battle of Waterloo or something, when actually it covers a wide range of different immersive interactive exercises to help you perform better when these situations happen in real life.
Wow, and I love what you said. Scenarios that are 5 to 500 variables. That seems quite a complex thing to arrange. What about you, Nick? Let's tell people a little bit about yourself. Where does your passion for this area actually come from?
Because by accident, kind of by accident, because my father helped run an adult education centre where some professional wargamers basically get together every weekend. And he said to me, you're like these people, they're a bit weird, and they're playing these weird games that they've mostly made themselves. You should come along and meet them. So I went along, and I was just astounded at professional wargaming, proper consideration of military or business situations, extrapolating from those situations, seeing what the consequences were, playing around with ideas, and it completely opened my eyes. Rather than games for fun, or rather than sort of very formulaic training. For example, the difference between being on thinking of the context you're working in, the difference between being on a firing range and actually operating a weapon under fire are two different things. In the same way, the difference between training and wargaming, to me, just opened my eyes. And as you can tell by sort of the tone of my voice and the length of my answers, my enthusiasm for it has just grown ever since, because you can become so confident in a situation, you almost become detached. You see people who say run through cybersecurity incident response so often that when it actually happens, they're almost bored, because they've got that level of learning where they know exactly who to contact, what this is, and they just step through the process. That's why I'm so excited about it. You want people in situations that difficult to be that competent.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Bring it to life and get competence before it matters, I suppose. Just briefly then, and then I'll hand over to Sean. What do you want, or would you like the uninitiated in this topic to better know? And actually, by that, I'm thinking of quite a lot of security professionals. Maybe they already know about wargaming, but maybe they don't call it that. So what should they actually know?
That's a damn good question. I wouldn't say I want them to know anything. I would say I want them to have the mindset of give it a chance. Think about the younger, maybe much younger people you know, and think of your own history. Think of how much you learned through play. Think of how better you are now at, just about anything, and think about how bad you were when you started. Anything from the work you do to creative pursuits like being an artist to, say, playing sport. And it's just through playing, through experimentation, that you have just got better and better, and failed and got back up and learned and so on. Bring that kind of attitude to this very wide and very variably defined area of wargaming, and see how it can benefit you.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said there, Nick. I think having an open mind to these things is fantastic. I know during my time in the military, we used to use, as a young soldier, before we used to embark on trips to, say, for instance, Northern Ireland, they'd have a system which was, I can't remember the name, I think it was called Small Arms Trainer, which had a big wide screen. You would stand in front with your SA-80 and you would patrol the streets. An incident would happen. And, through that incident, a number of scenarios could spin off that, depending on how you dealt with the scenario. You may completely de-escalate it, or you may end up opening fire. And then immediately, once the situation came to an end, you would get pulled to one side and you would get interviewed and grilled by the then RUC police officers. And they would ask you what happened, what did you do in this scenario, why did you open fire? And you'd be getting grilled in front of, a lot of people. And you'd say, what was this person wearing? You may say, he had a purple T-shirt, black jeans, blah, 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 this happened. And then everyone else is watching. They can see it on the screen, what this person was actually wearing. And you can see, after you're getting interviewed, you can see the pressure the individuals come under. And then they'll play the video back of what actually happened. And you can see where your rounds landed. And, it just puts you in the scenario, which, like you described, if you haven't been through a scenario, you don't know how you're going to react. But once you've done it 5-10 times, you're a lot more confident. You have the ability to think. You lose that rabbit in the headlights scenario once you've run through it, which I think is great.
That's just to bounce off that's brilliant and horrible. Like Northern Ireland, for what I know of that situation from being British in a certain age, is just an awful situation for everyone to be in. So to think what you want is the situation you described. People make mistakes and you replay those mistakes back to them is exactly the kind of training you want. And then, I mean, for a war game, what I would describe as a war game would be on a much larger level, like the manipulation of squads around the streets and so on. But you can see the mistakes, and especially because it reminds me of a war game I was once in, getting the interview afterwards and replaying things to you is a very necessary and horrible thing to do to players. Usually playing war games, like especially in a kind of semi-hobby, semi-professional context, you just kind of take your actions and you commit soldiers to a situation and whatever. But then we had a situation where some players then started playing members of the media and interviewed us afterwards and said basically, well, why did you do this? Why did you think that was a terrorist vehicle? Why did you attack that? And to have your decisions questioned in that way for a war game was like a wonderful and terrible surprise, especially sat in front of the rest of the players, but also in the situation you describe really brings home those lessons and makes them make such an impact to the participants, which is so much more effective to them than just being on a firing range and say, hit this target, not that target.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic training. It's low risk, better than learning on the job. It's low risk because you've run through these scenarios. It's highly effective, and it helps individuals better understand their roles and how they're to react when something happens. And in some of the scenarios as well, maybe the team leader gets taken out, and then the young soldiers have to step up into that role. So you're always kind of learning a level up of people in front of you. So it's great, highly effective training. But I was just interested to know, how has wargaming became a feature of the business environment?
I think partly military people moving into civilian areas and realizing, well, this was a benefit to us in these kind of situations. Therefore, there's other business situations. For example, something that doesn't feel appropriate for a war game, as in you're considering a merger with another company. Usually people just get together, have a big meeting, sort of, and probably a typical loudest person or highest paid person wins kind of meeting. Then they'll decide whether to do it or not. And then they'll actually see whether it was a good idea just in the actual progress of, did that merger work? Did their $1 billion companies succeed or fail? I think people with a military background in that situation thought, well, why not play this through? Why not, first of all, sit together and sort of just talk through the conversation, talk through in a conversational way what step would happen, then what do we do, then what issues do we face, what do you have from your experience, and a kind of what's known as like a free Kriegspiel style. But then you can bring in more complex rules around that, and also, as in many situations in business, bring in competitors and adversaries and suppliers and people role play in those positions. So suddenly a merger that looked really good looks great unless you think of that, well, Amazon are going to see this as a good idea and they move so much faster and they've got so many more resources. If we do this, they will then do that. And in 3 months, they'll have reached their objective and it's going to take us 9. When this isn't going to help us if we consider the wider context. Getting businesses to be able to think that through, I think, is why wargaming has kind of taken off, but also it hasn't, because it feels like playing, which is for some reason adults are afraid of being seen to think around scenarios through play. It's seen as too military and therefore too rigid, whereas, being ex-services, the military isn't the way it's perceived by us civilians as sort of a bunch of drones being led by one person. Drones as in mentally rather than literally. And also, it's kind of seen as sort of pushing figures around a table or something fun you do at a weekend, especially by nerds, when actually get professionals together, think through a situation in a structured way, you can make much better decisions than you could just by sort of, like I say, having part of the reason I'm so enthusiastic about this is I get frustrated by those conversations I hear about where the loudest or highest paid person just had the thought in their head on the golf course, made the decision, and now the company's in a terrible position because nobody thought through or planned or war gamed the results of their decision.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these bigger companies and organizations, really it should be looked at as, an essential part of business continuity planning, I guess. But stepping away from that anyway, I'm thinking back to my time before I left the military as well, some training that I thought was really valuable. When people are leaving, you've been almost, if you spent a long time in the military, you can become institutionalized. And it takes a lot of preparation for a soldier to leave the army and embark on a new career path. And I remember one of the things we'd done, I think it was called the Career Transition Partnership, where they brought in professionals and you would go through the motions of applying for a job and they would interview you. The interview would be recorded, it'd be on video. They'd ask you the questions. You'd run through the interview in real time and they would throw you some questions which may throw you off. You may think you've done great, and then when you watch back the interview, you'll see maybe you've got a tick, or you keep touching your face, or you're tapping your feet, and you don't realize these things until you've actually, we didn't call it wargaming, but until you've played these scenarios out.
That's kind of the same thing. I mean, again, that's even worse because that's role playing, and role playing is nerds sat around playing D&D, when actually it turns out a lot of us are far more nerdy than we expected. And also just the amount you can learn from role playing in general, both those games. And in that specific situation, as discussed, you wouldn't want someone leaving the services to fail their first 10 interviews but learn a lot. You'd want them to go through 10 role-playing exercises, make all their mistakes, especially in front of a video, in front of trainers, and then nail the first interview they get, because it's actually the 11th interview they've had. That's just another example of this kind of exercise being so useful to people. If, like I say, you just be a little bit more open-minded, experiment with the format, see what you can get out of it.
Yeah. When you're talking different formats, how does wargaming differ from, say, desktop planning, where you are moving pieces around a table, or go back to the military again? Things, if you are going on an exercise and you were planning, say, a company attack, you would build a model of the area you are going to carry out that attack, and you'd move the pieces about. You'd give your orders so everybody knew what they were doing. So is there a difference in tabletop planning to, yes, it's a computerized wargaming and running through these scenarios?
Oh, I was going to say, to be much shorter than my previous answers, in answer to your question, is there a difference? The answer is no. Like that.
Different formats.
That can, yeah. I mean, the term covers so much, but that kind of course of action planning. I mean, there's the three types, isn't there? There's COA, or there's red teaming, and in the middle there's rock drills. For most of business wargaming, I think, comes under that course of action planning. Like, well, this is what we intend to do. Let's move figures around. I mean, you could be in the same kind of situation, except you've got your organization chart laid out and you've got resources, small, I mean, just use some wooden counters representing money or people or administrative effort, and you move them around and you see what difference that makes to how you think the organization is going to develop. And also, I mean, as you would have had in the services, you get used to having limited resources. Companies often think they can achieve so much, but they don't appreciate the limited resources they've got and the operational effort just to assign those resources correctly. So they come up with grand plans and then realize that without the context of adversaries, without the context of competitors, they realize they don't have as many resources as they thought they had, or they do, but they don't have the operational ability to move those resources around correctly.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting. When you're talking about limited resources, as an organization or a security team, I could, run exercises for my security teams, penetration testing at various sites, where we get someone to break into the site, and then without informing the security team and just watching their actions on and how people have dealt with it. Or you could have different scenarios where the principal is attacked and watch how the different guys interact in the different scenarios. But that would be me running these tests for my teams. I think there's a lot of value as well in bringing in professionals. So, because sometimes you think, you look at your team, you're so heavily invested in it. I'm guessing you're from that space, so there'd be a lot. It's fine sitting around the table and talking through things yourself with your team and then doing training. But I think the value of that has only got so much, and you benefit more by bringing in an external expert. Just
any external viewpoint. Yeah, I mean, like the same way if you do that kind of testing, you can look around a building and say it looks secure. Then you can have one of your employees with that kind of mindset actually look around the building. And it's like, I use various terms. Sometimes I sort of call it maliciousness as a service. It's like, for your benefit and with a friendly approach, I'm going to make your life as difficult as possible. I'm going to expose all your mistakes, and then I'm going to write up a report afterwards of all the mistakes you made. But the reason to do that is to help you prevent genuine attackers exploiting those issues. In the same way that you do that as a security testing organization, part of the requirement for me as a professional wargamer is that when we say step through a war game and the organization says, well, yeah, we just call them or we just grab that resource, is to think about those assumptions and say, well, actually, how would that work? How long does that take? How long is that taken in practice? So that way, the customer actually has someone step back and say, are you sure this process always works that way? And can see issues with their process in advance rather than when an incident actually occurs.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen any uptake in services since the pandemic started? I mean, as companies have business continuity plans and you'll have all of these scenarios thrown in. And if someone had thrown in a scenario, what would you do if we had a global pandemic in the next year? Most people would just pay it lip service and think, yeah, that's never going to happen. But now I guess things are looked at differently because it has happened. I'm just wondering, do you find businesses take wargaming, scenario planning, business continuity more serious now? Have you had more calls for services.
Yeah, it's getting that way, and I think my answer would be that the sensible ones do. The ones that, I mean, some organisations are quite understandably focused on just getting through day by day, and you can understand why they've got that short-term view. But the better prepared organisations are actually planning farther and farther ahead, so they can I don't know how to put it. So they can. The reason I'm stumbling over words is it sounds bad, but they can take advantage of the pandemic, because in this kind of situation, people rethink a lot of ideas they're taken for granted. For example, there's something, I think it's being called like the Great Epiphany, in that a lot of people are looking at their careers and suddenly going, do I want to commute 4 hours a day every day? Do I want to do this job for another 20 years? And are choosing a lot of different plans and ideas and approaches to their career. In the same way, organizations have looked around and gone, well, we can't change. Everybody always comes to these offices, and our teams are always located this way. Our shifts always operate in this way. The pandemic has messed all that up, and they've had an opportunity to rethink the way they work as an organization. So they've been forced to think more experimentally. So now they're thinking, well, right, exercises, war games, let's experiment more. Let's see what else we can do to make our organization better, because we've been given this opportunity, whether we wanted it or not, to rethink our processes. So there's been a slight increase, but also a lot of organizations are understandably but regrettably sort of focused on getting through these issues day by day.
Yeah, I think organizations, when they embark on this sort of training, they have to keep an open mind, and to get the real benefits, I think you have to have right from the top down to the bottom involved in these wargaming scenarios. I think, you know, if you're a team leader and you're just booking it for your staff, it's kind of almost taking the easy way out. I think you need to be there with your ground troops, so you can be tested
maybe
alongside them, and maybe it's done in different. You know, you have your scenario training for your. We'll call them ground troops. You have your scenario training for your management level, and then there's some scenario training for your senior management level. But then I think so. It doesn't cause the embarrassment when you're all thrown together.
Exactly.
So I think there's benefit of breaking it down into chunks between the different levels, and then you come together at the end and you have, say, the final exercise, whatever that may be.
No, you're absolutely right, because wargaming is always described as a safe to fail environment, whereas I would describe it as a safer to fail, or maybe a less dangerous to fail, because still, if you're in charge of that organization and you make a mistake, you will have visibly made a mistake in front of everyone you're in charge of. Now, they should be open-minded and understand, well, this is where we experiment, this is where we play. But still, they may have an issue with that in sort of being kind of exposed publicly. So how you do that and quite how you sell it to an organization can be different.
I mean, I was just going to say there. Yeah, it can't be a negative experience, because if it's a negative experience, then the company won't want to embark on that training again. So I think you've got to make it as positive as you can, where everybody can learn, and it's not embarrassing. It's a learning process, and if this incident you haven't dealt with it correctly, you've been shown maybe you could have thought about it in this way, or you could have done that, and there's no embarrassment of individuals carrying out the training.
I had an anecdote that I thought would be perfect to share on this. Some people in the EP industry know Bob Shaw, big friend of the industry, long-time friend, but also a counter IED specialist. He very kindly came with me to a conference I did for the Nigerian Army, and we were doing an after-event specialist desktop workshop on counter IED dedicated for the counter IED specialists and armored vehicle specialists. And a Major General said, no, everyone will participate. I said, no, this is not for flag officers. This is for specialists. And I really, really tried to ensure that they did not participate. But in the end, he got his way. And guess what? They were not happy to reveal their thinking process in front of subordinates. just as I had predicted. So anyway, it's a tangent, but it's my little anecdote that I thought I'd slot in.
No, absolutely spot on. Plus, I mean, IED training, I would imagine, is very clear processes and very clear win conditions. So if you fail, it's very obvious you failed. Rather than you can argue, well, you can understand why I made that decision. It's like, no, you have died and you have killed those around you. No, that's a great example. I shall be citing that in future. Is just, do you want to look like this in front of your, like you said, Sean, ground troops? If the answer is no, leave them alone. Let them, and also let them play and make mistakes without a senior officer or senior member of the management team seeing them. It works both ways. So like you said, Sean, doing it at different levels is the way to go.
Yeah, because you can play out the scenarios with your management level. You can play out different scenarios with your ground troops, as we call them. And then, you can make everyone aware, come next week, we are going to have a organization-wide exercise or team-wide exercise where we'll all be together, and it's nothing to worry about. It's scenarios we've all spoken about, we've all been through them, and it makes people up their game. Because people will want to stand out and look good if you are a manager. I think, or a team leader, you want to be able to lead, but you won't be, as we mentioned, the rabbit in the headlights scenario. If you've played it through the previous week, you'll have a bit more confidence in dealing with the situation, as opposed to being thrown on you in front of everyone without any prior preparation and planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Nick, obviously, I'm very pleased that you're here. Obviously, I love this cross-pollination because the world of wargaming, the world of EP, I mean, it seems like a natural fit. You specifically, of course, you're a great guy, and it's great to work with you. But you have a soft spot for EP, at least from being an outside observer. You've been at least looking in on some of the EP conferences, and I thought that might be a nice way to sort of round it all back to our Circuit Magazine audience. What have you observed about our EP community from the outside, and how is Wargame going to be beneficial to them? I thought that'd be a nice angle.
I think for EP professionals, for me, first of all, I've been impressed and surprised at the level of professionalism, which I think shows that my information is from movies and TV, rather than sort of have any like people stopping me getting into clubs because I'm too scruffy, is basically my interaction with that sort of community. So seeing the level of thought, the level of strategy, and also how much training is required for relatively few actual incidents. So that level of attention that's required all the time that you might never use is where, to me, sort of wargaming strikes me as useful to the EP community, as well as EP work is so potentially dangerous. So being able to think it through, so mentally you get yourself in the right way of thinking, and then you drive the vehicle around the circuit, then you figure out firing angles and how you would defend an asset, say just transferring from their vehicle into a hotel lobby, that sort of thing. Being able to do that on a board, being able to think that through, like I say, 500 to 500 times. So when it actually happens, you've got EP practitioners who've got experience of that in a set of fictitious contexts, can transfer that to the real world. To me, that's where it's useful, rather than you have to spend so much money setting up like fake hotel lobbies or running real world exercises or getting everybody in the same physical space, regardless of pandemics. The travel expenses and time and scheduling required, do it all online over a shared, say, a Miro board or a concept board or something. You can get people beyond that initial lack of knowledge in such a cheap and convenient way.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you said there. I mean, EP is a bit like insurance. The principal pays for this service. A lot of the time he won't need it, but when it's needed, you need to have drilled the the action that you're supposed to deliver if something goes wrong. And you could be a bodyguard for 7, 8, 9 years and nothing's ever happened in your whole career as a bodyguard. And if you become not sloppy, but you've gone so long without any incident, some people will get into that false sense of security and mindset. It's mundane, day to day, and nothing ever happens. And in that time that it does happen, you get caught out. So, as you've just said, it's a very low risk way of running through different scenarios and getting people's brains to stay sharp with different incidents and scenarios that may play out.
I like it. All right. Well, every good conversation has to come to a close, and I think that's a nice place to leave it. Nick, I hope this is good for you as much as it is good for us, because obviously we're benefiting from all your wargaming experience.
Yeah, definitely.
I think obviously play sounds unprofessional to maybe the untrained ear, but there's other ways of saying play that allow you to fail in a safe environment. And wargame is absolutely something people should consider. And I know already people are saying, oh, but I do it already in this way or that way. Well, all right, but there is a structured wargaming formula. There are professionals out there. Nick, of course, is one of them, and I think that is where we can add value. So from Sean and myself, Nick, it's been a pleasure having you on, and yes, we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, I want to go and play some games now. I'm back with John Moss, and hopefully together we can draw a few lessons from this fascinating talk with Nick Drage. I think it's upon us to convince our communities that gamified learning, immersive learning, or even the word play is an acceptable term. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I thought this was a really great interview to have today. I didn't necessarily see it beforehand, but then, in our intro when we were talking about it, it was questions were presenting themselves, and then listening to you guys unpack this topic, it made me realize that this is probably something we should be doing a lot more of. And one of my concerns that we spoke about before the interview was really addressed, and I think this kind of culture of safe to fail or safer to fail, it was good to hear Nick actually go back and kind of revise that with, the safer to fail, showing that he understands the kind of industry that we work in, where perhaps it's not just okay to totally fail outright. And also the kind of groupings that we run through these scenarios with. I think that's really important.
It is, isn't it? And people need a safe space to experiment. And you could say, well, what new scenarios could come their way? Well, as we mentioned in the podcast with Nick, a pandemic, right? And also, there's a lot of far-flung black swan type events, which, do you know what? They would be an engaging wargaming exercise. All the way from things that you might think are science fiction to some of the more likely things, but I feel that those are natural candidates for wargaming. Obviously, we can't predict the next crisis. A lot of people are talking about how do we prepare for the next crisis. Well, it's always preparing for the old, the former war that you're stuck into. But at least this is a relatively harmless way of achieving it. But obviously, we're going to see a lot more from Nick and of course James Bohr, who contributed to the magazine a lot. But what else do we have coming up? Because I've got the feeling there are some exciting things, John.
Well, something that's right on the agenda coming up next week, in fact, is the International Security Expo, and the BBA is going to be there. The Circuit magazine is going to be there, and I believe we've also got something special happening on one of the evenings of the event.
That's right, absolutely. Conscious that people will be in town anyway for the expo in Olympia, we're going to have an informal, but social get together between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 28th. It's basically just 5 minutes walk from Olympia, and it's well, weather permitting. We've got pagodas anyway. It's outside. It's light-hearted. It's a nice way to get back in touch, and specifically useful for community members who are already at the ISC. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too. I mean, it's been a long time. I think the last time I was at an event, Pelham, was you can probably tell me which one it was. It was one of your events,
yeah,
and it must be 2 years ago now. Was that the Cyber EP Convergence?
Or it was the 5th annual EP Tech Forum, January 2020.
Wow, either way, we're going back some way. And whilst this isn't on the same scale, at least what's happened under the pagodas won't be. It'll be a great opportunity to see some familiar faces.
Absolutely, because there are people that know us, of course, from before. There's a strong community, strong listener community still there, but there will be new faces, and it will be great to meet you and to get that more personal touch, and maybe persuade them face to face that they should contribute to the magazine.
And yeah, and I know you create a segue there. However, I just wanted to say, just when you were talking about new listeners there, it just made me realize that actually, we started this podcast. This is episode 37. We started at the beginning of the year. And so the last time we all met up, this podcast didn't exist. Now, we haven't seen people for a long time, but there's a lot of people who've been listening to us, every week. And I know that's obvious, and I'm not just, taking a shot in the dark here, because I was actually speaking to an ex-colleague a few weeks ago, and I hadn't heard from him in quite some time. And if he's listening, that's James, great guy. And he actually said, it's like you've never been gone, because I listen to yourself and Sean every week, and that just blew my mind. That was the first time that I kind of realized the impact of being on the podcast. To me, it's just I turn up every week, I sit and have this great conversation with you and a guest, and it's so easy to think of it in those terms. So yeah, it's going to be crazy to meet up with people who've been listening to us over this journey. And, to hopefully for the first time, get some real world, feedback, hopefully some honest, but not too scathing feedback.
Indeed. Please do. Obviously it's a safe space, or a safer space, as a wargaming exercise. So please do that. And of course, please do contribute to the magazine. The ISE will provide lots of fruitful content and angles for articles. I'm sure of it, because we haven't actually all met up at Olympia for some time.
Yeah, that's going to be a big mission of mine, actually. When I go to the event, is to start harvesting for upcoming issues. We're actually in production now for issue 60. So if there's probably still a couple of spaces in there. So if anybody wants to get into a big landmark number like number 60, you've got probably a couple of weeks to get your submission across to us. But if not, there's plenty more coming after that.
Love it. I'll be there. I'll have my recorder there, so run away if you don't want to be recorded. And absolutely, we'll see you at this informal. No pressure, just an informal get together, 3 to 5 p.m. UK time. By Kensington Olympia. I'll send you some details. And of course, you will see it on the BBA Connect app and the NAB app. Probably not, because this is relating to a London event, but absolutely love the content and love the discussions going on there. Oh, and one thing I should say, 2 of our industry friends at least are speaking at the ISE, and we're hoping to catch up with them. Miranda Capose and Ivor Terrett. Just a shout out. So let's see if we can get them along to the to the informal drinks. They're not officially coming. I haven't really got any confirmation, but at least we know they're next to at the ISE. Perfect. All right. This week it's been Wargaming. Thank you to Nick Drage, and from John and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast. We look forward to seeing you in person, or at least some of you, next week.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.